Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Checkerboard Chat. I'm Josh Lane, Sports Saturday Daily Beacon, joined as always by Ethan Stone, Riley Thomas, and Andrew Peters. And we got a lot to talk about today between basketball and football, getting the bowl game and everything else. But just you guys, thanks a lot for being here and joining me. How you all doing today?
Pretty good.
Doing as well as I can be.
Yeah, I was about to say, I'm doing okay. My eyes still kind of hurt. I had to wash them out last night after witnessing that horrendous basketball game. But, other than that, we're doing okay.
Yeah, I'm also trying to just move through it minute by minute. Yeah, I have to, I guess, get that out of my mind, what I watched last night. Not even from a Tennessee perspective. I really don't care about that too much. It's more of just a basketball perspective. That set organized basketball back about 15 years.
And see, what's crazy was you thought that they kind of fixed it with the shot clock and everything else, but that was a lie last night. Nothing was working.
They couldn't. And the thing that was really interesting before I let Josh get into this, Syracuse and Villanova, the game afterwards, they also shot terrible.
Yeah.
I think Villanova was they were 4 of 27 or something like that. It was something crazy. Villanova wasn't shooting well either. And I think the highest 3-point percentage of the entire day was Syracuse at 33%. And even that's not very good.
That's not good either.
And everyone else was a significant drop. Villanova was at 20. Texas Tech didn't shoot well from 3 either. They were 16% and the balls were about 15 or 14.
Yeah.
And that makes me think that something was going on. I'm not going to be a
I think it was an invisible glass or some kind of shield around the basket. That has to be what it was, since everybody was shooting so poorly.
I have a theory, but I'll let you get into the questions. I'll talk about the theory later.
Yeah,
Real quick, it took the next about 5 years to learn how to play well in Madison Square Garden. So,
are you sure they? I don't keep up with the NBA that much, but I think they got some work to do. I don't know that they play that well all the time. Classic Knicks, right? So let's look at, before we get too much into Texas Tech, let's look at some good that happened over the past week and talk about Tennessee, Colorado on Saturday. Go out to Boulder, get a pretty good 69-54 win. Kenny Chandler really shined there. So just kind of we'll start with general thoughts on that game, and just obviously Kenny Chandler was, had a career high day there.
Yeah, so Kennedy Chandler, like you said, he's the obvious takeaway from Tennessee's game against Colorado. 27 points. Everyone thought it was 29 points at first. Someone somewhere got it wrong. It is a career high 27. Can't remember how many assists he had, but he was all over the court. The end of the first half especially, I believe he went on a personal 8-0 run and finished with something like 16 of Tennessee's previous 18 points across the first half into the second half. So he scored the first basket of the second half as well. And it's that's just ridiculous for a freshman to be doing against a pretty decent Colorado defense. They have their 2-3 zone that Barnes was talking about that they kind of break out sometimes, but it kind of, Ted Boyle differed from last year. He made it more of a man-to-man. And it's a legit man-to-man. They're stopping people. They're in the top 50 in KenPom right now in defensive efficiency. So this is a good defensive Colorado team that Kennedy Chandler was honestly able to just clown most of the afternoon. He was able to drive the lane, get pretty much whatever he wanted, and he was able to dish it to whoever he wanted. Fulkerson and him had a bit of a connection going in the first half. And that's really the only takeaway you can have, is that Kennedy Chandler was just dominant, and it's going to be a good sign moving forward for him against those types of defenses, those man-to-man defenses. Hey, you're not going to be able to stop if the right circumstances present themselves.
Personally, I never thought the game necessarily was in any question that Tennessee would win. Obviously, traveling to Boulder has its issues going, kind of first true road test for Tennessee. It looked like it was a packed stadium, but like you said, Kenny Chandler, he shut them up real quick. And you could just tell the matchup itself, it boded well in Tennessee's favor. They were kind of quicker. They just actually shot the ball well that game, better. They only scored 69, but their defense played really well again, allowing Colorado to score 54 points. So overall, it was just a great day from UT's perspective. I guess Just nothing really worried me about that game. Obviously, great to see Chandler doing what he did. I don't know. I have more text about Texas Tech game, but just kind of in general, just an easy win, good win for Chandler.
Yeah. So Ethan, as you kind of alluded to, Colorado not a bad defensive team by any stretch of the imagination. Probably they would be on the good side of things, and Tennessee's able to have offensive success. Kenny Chandler, going inside and all. His 3-point shooting wasn't great, but not a bad effort at all, considering Colorado had a good defense. And so then they go up to New York. They're playing in the Classic in Madison Square Garden against Texas Tech, who obviously has a great defense. But Tennessee just could not get anything going. Obviously, 3-point shooting is kind of the figure that stands out at this point. 6 for 40, I believe was what it was. For Tennessee, that's 15%. So just, they were trying to kind of alleviate that defense, make them, pay by shooting outside like they've done all year, but they just couldn't get any shots to go.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute for a second there. I was having fat fingers. Something I just noticed, and I'll get back to your point, is this is honestly pretty surprising. Tennessee, the past 2 games against Colorado, they went 6 of 24, and against Texas Tech, they go 6 of 40, like you said. That's a combined 12 for 64, which is just under 19% from the 3, which is just an insane outlier when saying that they shot like 51% against Presbyterian just a week before. And I think something else that's weird about this Tennessee team is they have yet to have a performance where they've been in the 30% range from 3. They've either been above 40 or they've been below 30. They've never had a range where it's just been decent. They're either really hot or they're really not. And that obviously showed itself against Texas Tech. To say it was the worst 3-point shooting contest from 2 teams I've ever seen is an understatement. Texas Tech was playing very, very bad from 3. That they're not exactly a 3-point shooting team. That's not their thing. But you kind of have to give credit to Tennessee's defense, which for how bad the offense was, it may have been one of the best defensive games Tennessee has played in a long time. They held them to just 57 points, obviously. And with that, I was just looking. Tennessee is now the number 1 defensive team in the country via KenPom, which, you can't say anything to say the defense was bad. I mean, going into overtime and holding someone to 57 points is fantastic. But you can also say that Texas Tech might have even had a better defensive performance just because they ran their defense so well. And I don't want to get into a tangent about it, so I'll let someone else talk about it, but I'll talk about it in a minute. But their defense is mostly just exactly how it sounds. It's called the no middle defense, and it means take away shots from the middle, take away a post presence, force teams to shoot threes. And honestly, they haven't done a very good job at it this season. They're like one of the worst 3-point shooting defenses in KenPom because they just allow people to shoot it from deep. And usually when you're wide open, you make it at a pretty high clip. But Tennessee just wasn't able to make it fall, and that's why they lost. It sounds kind of simple. It sounds kind of like I'm just oversimplifying things, but that's really what it comes to. If Tennessee makes one more 3-pointer, if they go 7 of 40, they win that game. And it's frustrating from a Tennessee Vol fan perspective for Tennessee Vol fans, but ultimately that's what it comes down to. You just got to hit open shots.
Yeah, that was the point I was going to go at, is kind of about their defense. You could tell from the get-go that they had one clear goal in mind, and that was to not allow Tennessee to score and beat them in the paint. Whenever Chandler, Vescovy, anybody had driving to the paint, or Folky got a post touch, it was a double team, somebody's helping. They were daring Tennessee to shoot. And like you said, Ethan, yes, Texas Tech defense is good. They're long, lanky. I think they said everybody was between 6'6" and 6'8", so very athletic and switch every single play. But my thing was, it wasn't Tech's defense that won in the game. It was just Tennessee shot that bad. That's just what I take away from that. Like you said, they were leaving all of Tennessee's players wide open. I mean, they were literally handing Tennessee the win. They said, hit a 3, hit this 3, you win the ball game. And they couldn't. That's just my big takeaway. Yes, like Texas Tech has a good defense, one of the best Tennessee will probably see all season. But honestly, like you said, Ethan, they make one more, two more threes, a couple more free throws, win the ball game. Like that's what it boils down to. Tennessee just could not hit a shot to save their life. That's just a big takeaway from me. So,
yeah, I saw a lot of things on Twitter blaming Rick Barnes, and if I'm honest, I think Rick Barnes did an okay job coaching. I think he did well actually, because I mean this is the classic example of execution being the problem, because Barnes knew, hey, the 3-point line is going to be open. And people are saying, like, you know, why did they keep taking the threes? They kept taking the threes because that's what Texas Tech was giving them. That is the only way you can score on that defense, because it's just so, I mean, I'm looking for another word, but elite at stopping teams from getting in the middle. Mark Adams, even though Chris Beard left, Mark Adams is the original architect of the no middle defense. It's the same defense that took Baylor to a national championship last season. It's so good at stopping post players from being able to score that the only shot that's open is a three. And it was no different Tuesday night. 40 attempts from deep. That's just insane for Tennessee to be able to take that many attempts. And if they make one more, if they go 7-40, they win the game. If they make one free throw, they probably win the game. If Josiah Jordan James doesn't hyperextend his knee on that dunk, Tennessee wins the game. And it's frustrating coming from that point to see people blaming Barnes for this, because it just in many ways it's just not his fault. The team has to execute better if they're going to win big games like this against very good defenses.
So can we just chalk this up to maybe it being an off night then? Just as kind of Josiah said post game, it just happens in basketball. Some nights you can't miss, and some nights you can't hit the basket at all. Is it just that, or kind of looking, as Ethan, as you mentioned earlier, at some of Tennessee's recent stretches in 3-point shooting, under 30%, and through the last 4, they had 51% against Presbyterian. So they've been wildly inconsistent with 3 all year. I don't know if necessarily it was a strength of the team, if that's the right word to use, but early on, Rick Barnes, noticeably was encouraging everybody to shoot more threes, get your open looks. And obviously, as last night, you said they had plenty of open looks. Do you think that they should have stopped? Or I don't think you think that, considering what you just said about Barnes, but is it just an off night, or maybe Tennessee actually has a 3-point shooting problem despite the fact that they'll take 43 a game?
I think Tennessee might have a 3-point shooting problem. That I haven't quite determined, but I think it's pretty easy to it sounds lazy, but I think it's easy to chalk it up as it was just an off night, because I've said it 700 times now. If you just make one more shot, you win the game. I won't ramble this time. Riley, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, no, I I definitely agree. I like you said, just it's not they have a 3-point problem. It's just the only thing that was open, because Texas Tech was clogging the paint. I mean, I will say their bigs, whatever, outplayed Tennessee's bigs, and that was a big factor. Like, I think they were taking the broadcast. There was a lot of shots put up, obviously, by UT, but I think what they have, 2 or 3 offensive rebounds, 4 maybe, if that. Texas Tech just crashed the boards. They said, we're going to dare you to make this shot, and then once you miss it, we're getting the rebound and we're going to push it. They were not going to get beat down low, and that was the factor. And Tennessee's bigs got outplayed. And like you said, go back to Barnes. He played the right lineup. He went small, put Folky at the 5. He went Zakai, Vescovy, Chandler, and Josiah Jordan James. That lineup was working. They were getting open shots. They were playing a lot faster, moving the ball a lot more, passing tempo. That was working. So I don't put this on Barnes at all, like you all said. It is strictly an execution. Barnes put his players in the right position to make the play. They simply just couldn't do it. And also, for the people that are claiming the season's over within December, you're stupid. Just hold on a second. It's basketball. Everything is still in front for Tennessee. It's one night in the middle of December, a game that I wouldn't say is meaningless, but it doesn't really hurt. It's good exposure for Tennessee, figuring out what they got to fix going forward against a good, lanky defensive team like that. They'll fix it. I have faith in Deacon Barnes and company. Don't worry about it. Let's just get to, you got Memphis in a week. Worry about that. Put everything in front of you. Everything's just going to be fine.
That's an interesting point that you bring up there, because obviously, as you mentioned, you can only learn from this game, right? There's so many games in college basketball compared to like a 12-game football season. the one loss early in the season doesn't come up as big as maybe it would in another sport. And so, they're just going to look at it. They're going to learn. And we've talked about the threes and even offensive rebounding, which is a good point that they weren't getting it. But as we've kind of mentioned, Tennessee, they really were struggling from the free throw line. What's the number here? 8 for 16. So that's 50%. So, go ahead and add, 8 more points on there, and then Tennessee wins the game pretty easily, or, however you want to chalk it up. But it's things like, and Tennessee's kind of struggled from free throw line all year. So it's kind of, I guess, with those, I don't know if you want to call it a small aspect of the game, but those things that they need to clean up. And I think they'll learn from it. They did from Villanova when they lost early on, and then they came out and beat North Carolina pretty handily. So I don't think this loss will hurt them. They've got 2 kind of easier opponents coming up between Greensboro and USC Upstate. But I think they'll definitely learn from that.
Yeah, I think going back to Riley's earlier point that, like, the season most definitely isn't over. Texas Tech is a great basketball team. They weren't ranked, but the only reason they weren't ranked is because they played a team, Providence, that is kind of on the up and up right now. They have a very dominant post presence, and kind of like I alluded to a little bit last night, or as I was telling some people, with a dominant post presence, you can overcome Texas Tech's defense. And, that might be the biggest takeaway from this, is that maybe Tennessee needs a little bit more of a dominant post presence. Maybe Brandon Huntley-Hatfield needs to kind of figure it out a little bit. Maybe even Fulkerson. He's not exactly a dominant player. He's more of like a, shifty, get someone off their feet and shoot the ball type of forward. But that's more of a problem that I see than the 3-point shooting aspect, me personally. I see more that Tennessee was forced to go one-dimensional, and Barnes was forced to say, okay, we're just going to have to keep taking the open shot, and eventually it'll fall. I mean, Josiah Jordan-James, he hits that one at the end that sends it to overtime, and, you just kind of got to keep trusting that. You got to keep trusting that your basketball players are going to make basketball shots. And, going back to Texas Tech a little bit, their middle defense is very good. I was talking about Tennessee being number 1 on KenPom in defensive efficiency. That jumped Texas Tech up from 24 to 4 in the nation in defensive efficiency. And KenPom's a predictive metric. It's a computer number, so it doesn't always tell the full story. But I'd say it's fair holding a top 13 team to 52 points like Texas Tech did. That, they know what they're doing on defense. Mark Adams knows what he's doing scheme-wise on the defensive.
Yeah, just a couple of quick things I kind of realized last night too. I feel like Kennedy Chandler kind of looked like a freshman last night, if you all know what I'm trying to say. He looked like, making some freshman mistakes, wasting clock at the end. They're trying to hoist up a 3, making some indecisive decisions, driving the lane, passing or shooting late. And he'll learn from that. He's a 5-star for a reason, the great talent that he is. Like y'all on Saturday, he put 29 points. But then last night, I'm not sure. I don't think he scored 10. So he struggled a little bit, and it's okay. It's one game. And one kind of final point I found interesting last night, Huntley-Hatfield played 4 minutes last night. I don't know what the reasoning is, but I just think it's weird that Barnes goes to Uros first, and then he goes to Huntley-Hatfield. I don't know why. I don't get it. Huntley-Hatfield's a 5-star. I know 5 stars don't mean anything, but if you ask me, Huntley-Hatfield is a lot better than Uros Plavsic. I don't know. I'm just coming from a perspective of a watcher and a fan and a media, whatever. I don't know why he keeps on doing it. I think that's an interesting storyline moving forward. And I thought BHH would have had a good matchup last night. He's 6'10", he's long, athletic. I thought he kind of matched up well with that offense. I think Uros, he's kind of a liability sometimes. I don't know. Whenever I see him out there, I get kind of frustrated. I don't know about you guys. I love his energy. I love he plays hard, but I just don't know why Huntley-Hatfield wasn't out there last night. I think that's an interesting storyline moving forward. If there's something, I don't think it's a big, hopefully he gets more playing time, because before that game, he's putting up, Tennessee Tech had 14 points, Presbyterian went off again. So I don't know. It'll be interesting moving forward what the kind of dynamic is with that situation.
I'll say I think Uros, he's progressing for sure from last season. He can pick up a basketball, he can rebound a basketball, and he can shoot a basketball, which all those things he could not do last season. And He was a complete liability last season. I'd say this year he has what it takes to be a role player. But as far as your point earlier about him being in the Texas Tech game over Brandon Huntley Hatfield, that's probably the worst bit of coaching that Barnes did last night, if any. I think, like I said earlier, I think Barnes had a good coaching outing. I really do. I don't think it was perfect. I don't think it was bad, because Barnes was telling them, just keep taking open shots. That's all they're giving us. But getting back to the point, Brandon Huntley Hatfield is a physical player. He may not have like all the intangibles yet, but he'll get down low and he'll move you around a little bit. I mean, that Batcho guy for Texas Tech, he's getting rebounds all over the place, over Uros, over John Fulkerson, over Josiah Jordan-James, who's an excellent rebounder. Whoever you want to plug in there, he was out rebounding people. You got to try something different at some point. Brandon Huntley Hatfield is that type of guy that can just bully around a little bit in the paint. And maybe he could have changed something. Maybe you can get people actually driving to lanes if he's boxing people out, grabbing rebounds. Tennessee didn't grab an offensive rebound until like 10 minutes left in the second half. That's unbelievable. That's completely unbelievable that you wouldn't make some sort of change to take Uros out, to take even John Fulkerson out, even though he had 10 rebounds, led the team. Just switch something up. Like, don't keep doing the same thing you're doing, on the rebounding side of things. Shooting wise, I don't think there's much else you could have done, because you're not putting Brandon Huntley Hatfield in there. You're not moving stuff around, seeing what could happen. And that's not even necessarily saying that Brandon Huntley Hatfield would have done any better, but give him a chance. He's a physical freshman. He's a 5-star freshman for a reason. Why not just plug him in there, see what happens?
Yeah, I was gonna say I feel like Brandon Huntley Hatfield really could have brought some offense there, and late in the fourth. And like you said, if something's not working, why not just try something else? And I think that's something else last night. Could have been Huntley Hatfield, and I think he really could have made a difference on offense. At least, got a dunk in there. Hopefully you guys heard that. I don't know if my Wi-Fi is messed up.
It is a little choppy on my end, so I think we got the gist between the breaks. But I mean, you've talked about a great point, all that Brandon Huntley Hatfield 4 minutes, 1 rebound, and 1 point. So not a ton of production, but in that same kind of light, Uros played 10 minutes, 1 rebound, a foul, and 2 points. So that's over double the time. I think at some point you just have to look at the season and just how Uros has played and say, all right, maybe he's not the guy that needs to be first off the bench. When we're talking big man, maybe Brandon Huntley Hatfield needs to come in. But kind of going forward over the next week, as I kind of mentioned earlier, Tennessee, they host UNC Greensboro and USC Upstate, a couple, lower level opponents. Obviously, they're not going to look past anybody, but what does Tennessee need to do over the next week in these 2 games to kind of right the ship, so to speak, to kind of fix everything before they have another tough matchup against Memphis in the neutral ground in Nashville? What do they need to do?
So it's actually a pretty decent test coming forward with UNC Greensboro. Obviously, they're not the glitz and glamour that Texas Tech is, but they're kind of a middle of the pack Southern Conference team. They're currently number 26th in the nation in offensive rebounding percentage. So that's kind of a step backwards from Texas Tech, but still something that you can go out and test yourself against, because apart from 3-point shooting, I would say that offensive rebounding was the worst part of Tennessee's performance Tuesday night. And so that's just, you can just use that as practice. Obviously, UNC Greensboro isn't great at many things, but obviously offensive rebounding is a strength. That looks like defending the 3 is a pretty good thing that they're good at. They seem to be more of a outside in type of defensive team, apart from Texas Tech's no middle defense. So that'll be kind of a contrast there for Tennessee and Rick Barnes to be able to just, see what they've got moving forward against teams that play a little different than Texas Tech, moving into SEC play, and obviously moving into Memphis, who, though they've had their offensive struggles, has had a really good defensive year. Kind of a little bit of a skid lately, losing to Iowa State, losing to Georgia, and they've got some locker room problems as far as I can tell, but obviously still a good defensive team. Got 2 top 10 recruits. Jalen Duren obviously just reclassified to this season. They got Amoni Bates, who might be one of the better players in the nation this year. And, that's going to be a fun matchup in Bridgestone. Obviously, Tennessee's next marquee matchup, UNC Greensboro doesn't exactly present that. I'd say USC Upstate, even a step down from that. I don't know much about USC Upstate, to be totally honest with you, but I do know that you can't really take any game for granted. Florida just lost to Texas Southern, who is 0-7. Utah Valley won a game against BYU the other day. I know you have other teams that are struggling against mid-major opponents. So Rick Barnes has just got to get them going and say, hey, we're going to go beat UNC Greensboro. We're going to go beat USC Upstate. And then we got Memphis, Arizona, and Alabama back-to-back, which are all top 50 teams in the country.
I'll just say bluntly, they just need to make a shot. I mean, just to put it simple terms, just make some shots, get your confidence back. And it's a bad night from last night when Justin Powell doesn't make a three. That's also not good. When he was perfect against Presbyterian, and then he didn't make a single one last night. So to me, it's just get your confidence back. The defense will always be there. Like you just said, they're number one in KenPom right now. That's not, it's going to be there. The defense will be there regardless. You can have an off defensive night and still be fine, especially against UNC Greensboro, USC Upstate. Put all the focus into shooting and making shots. And also, I want to see some better post play. The one guy that had a decent game last night was Folke. I think what he have 10 points, maybe the only guy in double figures, maybe something like that. Like what's happened to Kamwa? These last, first two games, double almost 20 points a couple. He's been non-existent. I need BHH back in there playing more than 4 minutes a game, more than Urosh. I just need to see some more consistent play from the post so that this team can be an all-around effort and not just focus on, Chandler, Vescovy, Zakai Ziegler to score some baskets. I need to see some better post play because, like we said earlier, if you don't have good post play, you're not making it to March. And clearly last night, Tennessee did not shoot that well, and they need to rely on something. Could not shoot that well last night. They rely on something better than just, if you can't, you go 6 for 40. Go to John Fulkerson, go to BHH, do something down low. Let's just see some better post play and stuff like that.
So let's transition then and maybe something a little more optimistic and, something that we'll talk about the Lady Vols. They go on the road on Sunday and defeated Virginia Tech 64-58. Good matchup there. That was going to be one of their toughest ones being so far, just, being on the road and some of the players, obviously, Virginia Tech had that pro prospect, but just what went well for the Lady Vols up in Virginia? What were they able to do well, in order to take that win?
Yeah, they played a pretty complete game. They had a scare there, late in the third quarter. Virginia Tech outscored them 17-12, and so they were and had a huge fourth quarter. I think one of the positive things we've seen about this team is that when Jordan Horston has an off game, somebody else can step up. And I think that's just been huge for them. That happened on Sunday. It's happened a lot of times this year so far. So I think it's just encouraging for them to be able to have somebody who, if one player's off, another player's on, and I think that's been kind of their key to success so far.
I know we've been talking about a bad basketball game. That was a great basketball game to watch. It was back and forth, both teams going at each other. You could tell these were both highly contested, just great basketball teams. Like you said, Andrew, Tennessee was down 7 in the fourth quarter, and just this team is gritty. They will just come back. They don't back down no matter who the opponent is. Like you said, Jordan Horston, these last two games has not put up more than double figures. And then against Virginia Tech, Jordan Walker put up 17 points, perfect from three-point land. And then Sarah Puckett, or now as the team calls her, Sarah Buckets, put up 15 off the bench, 7 for 11 shooting. She was excellent. They just gave her the ball on the block, and she was just dominating. They could not stop her. And like you said, Josh, to beginning the point, going into the matchup, the big matchup we talked about was Tamari Key and Elizabeth Kitley. Elizabeth Kitley is another 6'6" center, same size as Tamari Key. It was going to be their toughest matchup yet, and they shut her down. She went 1 for 12, 4 points, 2 of those from the free throw line. She had 9 boards, but she could not get a shot up without a couple of the people on her. Tamari Key shut her down. Key had I think her 5th double-double of the season, 11 points, 12 boards. She had 5 blocks again. She is a paint monster. I love watching her play and just dominate down low. The Lady Vols are good. These ladies are good. Top 10 for the first time in 3 years. It's exciting to watch them be good again. It's been so long, I feel like, since they've been kind of relevant in college basketball, and Kelly Harper and company are getting so much out of them, even without Ray Burrell. It's just exciting to watch them be good again.
Yeah, so as you alluded to, obviously Ray Burrell goes down very early on in the season. Jordan Horson was kind of filling in that gap, but lately she's been struggling. Now you can just call it a 2-game slump or whatever. But how beneficial has the Lady Vols depth been? Obviously, they got so many good players, and a lot of them just weren't getting minutes. With who was starting on the court. But how has that depth played out over the last couple games between Ray Burrell being out and Horson struggling?
The depth has been huge. You've got, it's a different girl every night. Like against Tennessee Tech, it was Tess Darby. She got 12 points. Virginia Tech, it was Jordan Walker and Sarah Puckett. So it's just Kelly Harper can literally just turn to the next person and they'll just step right up. Yes, Jordan Horson, obviously right now with Ray Burrell being out, is your bona fide leader and best scorer, but you can't rely on her every night. You need to have somebody else step up and be the leader or be the one to score, just lead the team to victory. And they have that. They can just turn to somebody else. And personally, I know people have been out there saying this. Kelly Harper deserves a Coach of the Year candidate with her performance right now with this team and what she's getting out of without having arguably a top 10 player in the country, Ray Burrell. So to me, this is just speaking evidence to Kelly Harper, her coaching staff, and just the grittiness and the depth of this team.
Yeah, and I also think, if you're any other team in the conference, any other team in the nation, you're looking at this team, Tennessee team, you're kind of worried that, when they do get Ray Burrell back, they're going to be a really scary team. They're already so good, and they don't even have their best player. And like you said, Riley, arguably a top 10 player in the country. So I think that also shows a lot of promise to think about what this team is capable when, and hopefully soon when Ray Burrell returns. So I'm excited to see what this team looks like when they regain her.
Yeah, has there been any update on Ray Burrell? Is there a timetable? Is she still just kind of day to day?
Yeah, I think it's pretty much day to day at this point. If you watch the games, you see her on the bench. She's standing up. She's getting hype with her team. So it doesn't seem to be anything too serious. I think the biggest update we've gotten is that it's not an ACL injury. So that's promising.
It was a leg injury or knee injury? Okay.
Yeah, I believe knee.
Okay. Well, as I think Riley, you brought it up, but the Lady Vols ranked in the top 10 at number 9 now. First time in 3 years, apparently. I believe it's the highest since Kelly Harper's been here. But just what do you think? Is this as high as the Lady Vols can go, or do you think? I think you kind of mentioned it too, Andrew, that they can be even higher once they get Ray Burrell back and everybody starts clicking. What's the outlook on that? They're finally in the top 10 for the first time.
There are some great teams in Lady Vol and college basketball on the women's side. Obviously, you got South Carolina. They're the team to beat this year in college basketball. So many returners, like Aaliyah Boston. She's really, really good. They got the best team in the country. UConn right now without Paige Beckers. She's out for 6 to 8 weeks. She fractured her knee. Iowa's really good with Caitlin Clark. She put up another triple-double a couple nights ago. So obviously they have a really high ceiling. I definitely believe now, after seeing them go against really good competition, beating Texas, come back against Texas, USF, and Virginia Tech, arguably, 2 of those teams were ranked at the time. Virginia Tech is a really good basketball team. I think they should be ranked, but they weren't on Sunday. So just seeing Tennessee play against equal competition, or if not better, honestly, because Texas beat Stanford early in the season. And I know it was in Knoxville, but Tennessee came back from that. So to me, their confidence just keeps on getting better and better. I don't think they believe anybody can beat them, even if it's South Carolina, UConn, whoever it might be. Their ceiling is high. I think they can definitely compete with the best of the best. Obviously, we'll see in a week or two when they play Stanford. I think Andrew will be at that game. So you will really see how good this Lady Vol team is going against one of the best top 5 team in the country. So that'll show us and just everybody else and say, wow, these Lady Vols, they're for real and no one should mess with them.
Yeah, and I'll I'm sure we'll do a pod before that Stanford game, but that Stanford game is going to be a huge opportunity for them to prove themselves, kind of prove that they're actually this top 10 team that they've looked like so far. I think that would be a huge win for them. I think that will be a win. My bold prediction 2 weeks out, but yeah, we'll see how that plays out. And then you mentioned UConn and South Carolina. Tennessee will also face those teams later down in the season. So they've definitely had their opportunities to prove themselves so far, and they'll only get to do that a few more times this year.
Yeah. So
hopefully,
go ahead.
Josh.
Sorry.
No, you're good. I was just gonna say, hopefully at that point, Ray Burrell is back because you need her for that game so bad. Because obviously Tennessee has really good players, Jordan Horston, Tamari Key, but it's Stanford, top 5 team in the country, just won the Natty. I hope that game she has that game circled as maybe a comeback game. I want to see Tennessee's best versus their best. That's just what I want to see.
One last point. I almost think it's a great opportunity. I mean, obviously, you want Ray Burrell in the game. You want her to come back as soon as possible. But I think it's a great opportunity for these younger players and these players who would be, not playing as many minutes with Ray Burrell if she were in. It's a great opportunity for them to get some experience, for them to take charge of a game. Like we saw Sarah Puckett do a few days ago, and also Jordan Walker do a few days ago. So I think this is a great opportunity for them.
Yeah, and just looking at their schedule as we kind of look at maybe this heavyweight matchup. I know it's still a few days away. Well, that's the same day as the Memphis game, so that'll be a good day for Tennessee basketball. But the Lady Vols play Stanford. They play South Carolina, of course. They got UConn on the schedule again. And I know we talked about it. I think that was probably in one of those early episodes that didn't get aired. But they don't necessarily have to win all 3 of those games to do the Lady Vols. Even 2 out of 3, I think, is probably what they need to shoot for in terms of proving themselves and knocking down these these top 5 teams, whatever their ranking is. And if they don't have Ray Burrell right now, that hurts, but it's not the end of the world because they still have 2 more shots against the upper echelon of women's basketball to prove themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. They definitely do. And I mean, I know you said to win 2 of those 3 potentially. It's going to be tough. You can't really put a number on that because they're one of the best teams in the country. If you can just go out there and compete and, not lose by a lot. I don't think they will. I think they can easily, if they obviously you go by team, Stanford lost to Texas and Tennessee beat Texas. So in reality, Tennessee can 100% beat Stanford. And like Andrew said, he thinks they will. I mean, we could definitely see it happening. I hope it does. I also hope that, Thompson-Boling Arena is rocking for that game because they need to, Lady Vols need to get some attention. Honestly, they are playing at a high level, top 10. The fans need to show their love for Lady Vols. And I hope for that game, they pack out the stadium, show their love because Tennessee can beat them. And I think I'm going to agree with Andrew. I think they will. I hope Ray Burrell's back because there's a video out there on Sunday. She was out there in street clothes shooting threes and making them with ease. So it's just probably they're taking it a very slow process. And hopefully at that game, she's back because I would love to see Stanford against Tennessee's best, Ray Burrell, Jordan Horston, Tamari Key, all of them. I hope that's the case, and I cannot wait to watch that game.
Yeah, and you mentioned that Texas beat Stanford, who obviously we beat Texas. South Florida also beat Stanford. So both of Stanford's losses have come to teams that we beat. So that's kind of some promise there.
I think we're just guaranteeing a win right now on this checkerboard chat. I'm sorry if we kind of jinx the Lady Vols, but it's just proof's in the pudding for us at this point. So
I was looking at the ranking and I was a bit surprised to see Stanford still in the top 4 despite having 2 losses. They're only 5-2. I don't know necessarily where they started the season out in the ranking. I don't think they were probably number 2 if I had to guess, but I don't know. Still ranked number 4 with 2 losses. Lady Vols sitting at 8-0 right now, so I don't know.
Yeah, I think everybody's a little bit confused why Tennessee isn't higher in the rankings, but maybe they like it that way. Maybe they like to be the underdog.
Yeah, definitely. I think so. So kind of before we wrap up women's basketball, they've got 4 non-conference games left before they start SEC play. Obviously, Stanford is the biggest one. but Georgia State is the next one next Sunday. So they had a week off in between time. They played a good amount of games in the last stretch between the Thanksgiving tournament and Tennessee Tech and then Virginia Tech. So just what do the Lady Vols need to do in this next week before they host Georgia State? Obviously, they're 9-0. They've got all the momentum. But still some things to correct. Does it just take a week, get healthy? Maybe Ray Burrell makes a lot of progress, or what are they looking at this week before Georgia State?
I think one of the big things for me going into Georgia State is get Jordan Horston's confidence back. At Tennessee Tech, she looked a little bit sloppy at times. I think she had about 4 or 5 turnovers. I think it just looks like to me she's pressing a little too much. At least these last 2 games, she has been a lot. I wouldn't say all the weight's on her shoulders, but she might feel like that because Ray Burrell is out. But she should not feel like that. And obviously, I don't know if you saw the video of Coach Harper going to Horston after the game on Virginia Tech and like just literally looking eye to eye to her. And to me, it looked like it was a motivational talking like, hey, yes, you may have had off night shooting, but you did so much more things for us. And that's the thing with Jordan Horston. Yes, there could be nights where she is off, but she still continues to play hard on defense, get boards, make some stops, make great passes. So I think the big thing that the Lady Vols need to do is just get her confidence back, get her making shots, run the offense, get people involved. Don't, press too much. I feel like you have to make the play. Just make the smart play. It'll come to her. And I have faith in Jordan Horston. Obviously, before these last 2 games, I think she was averaging like 20-plus points. So she just hit a little bit of a schneid right now. Nothing too big to worry about. But I would just say going into Georgia State, get her confidence back, heading into Stanford and the rest of the non-conference schedule and leading up to SEC.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things you use this game for. One, you stay healthy. That's the biggest thing. Don't do anything dumb that's gonna injure one of your players before your biggest test so far. So that's the first thing. Number 2, like Riley said, just get some of that confidence back for your players that haven't necessarily got it going. Jordan Horston, the main one, obviously had a couple of rough stretches, but I think you also, pull some players off the bench who haven't seen the floor as much, get them some playing time, get them comfortable, because, you never know when they'll need to step in and step up. So I think those are the 2 main things you do. Also, just work on free throw shooting, try to get to the line, try to make some shots. They haven't been able to figure it out from the free throw line, and they really need to before a couple of big games coming up. So, yeah, I think if you do those 3 things, you call it a win. Obviously it shouldn't be too much of a test for them.
Yep. So again, not much going on with Lady Vols this week, but they will have full coverage of all their games next week at utdailybeacon.com, just as the same with the men's. Before we wrap it up, we do need to address football. They got selected to the bowl game, the Music City Bowl in Nashville. That happened Sunday. A lot's happened since then. That's why this has fallen to the bottom of the list. But still big news for Josh Heupel and the Vols. He comes in first year, wins 7 games, and now gets rewarded with the Music City Bowl. So just what are y'all's initial thoughts on Tennessee getting selected or invited? I don't know what the right word is, to the Music City Bowl.
My first thought is that I was wrong. I thought it was going to be Duke's Mayo Bowl. Music City and Duke's Mayo are pretty much equal in terms of, I guess, prestige. And Music City Bowl makes sense just because, they lost a lot of money last year, as did everybody else. And having Tennessee, a, state team in that against Purdue, who's fairly close to Nashville, is a good moneymaker. Both those fan bases will travel. They have some history, kind of more on the basketball side for Tennessee and Purdue, but obviously the 2 fan bases are passionate, and I think it'll make for a good matchup. I think it's about where I thought it was going to be. If Tennessee was gonna play a Big Ten opponent, I thought it was going to be Minnesota. I'm actually happier that it is Purdue because I think they're the better team. Obviously, they have wins against Iowa and Michigan State. I'm not sure about Iowa, but I know Michigan State is a great win for Purdue. And honestly, if Purdue doesn't beat Michigan State, they're probably in the college football playoff. So, that's obviously something to look for there. But I think it's going to be a good matchup. I'm not exactly sure what to think. I'm not too read up on Purdue. I'm not sure how they match up too well against Tennessee. I know obviously Tennessee is going to be able to score on them because they're not a top 25 defense. I can say that pretty confidently, but I can't claim to know too much about Purdue, so I'm not sure. I think it'll be a good game. I think obviously 8-4, and they having beat Michigan State and Iowa, that calls for a good game against Tennessee, who has battled with some of the big boys such as Ole Miss and even Georgia in the first half.
It's not, like you said, it's not really a surprise. They're in the Music City Bowl, and at this point, it seems like the bowls were kind of reaching out more demographically, because like Duke's Mayo has North and South Carolina in that bowl game. Like some of the Florida teams got Florida bowls, so it just seems like they may have reached more demographically for your reason. The money at this point in their last year was a tough year for everybody, so they're trying to get the money back. So it's like we said, we figured it'd be Duke's Mayo or Music City. No surprise. I didn't think Tennessee's record was good enough to go to a Florida bowl game, and they just went to the TaxSlayer bowl game. So this makes sense. I will say I'm excited for it because Jeff Brom is now playing Tennessee again. And obviously we all know the 2017 scenario where Tennessee had about 4 different coaches and none of them said yes. And Brom was one of them. According to a couple of reporters, people thought Brom was coming and he did not come. So now Tennessee gets to finally play Purdue with Jeff Brom. So it's going to be interesting to see how that matchup is. Obviously, like you said, they did be at the time 2 top 3 teams. Not sure Iowa could be considered as one anymore, but Michigan State at the time definitely could be. So they have good wins, but what's crazy is they beat Iowa and then lay an egg against Wisconsin. So it just seems like you don't know what Purdue team you're going to get each week. So I think what they did, they honestly caught teams at the right time. They caught Iowa off a high win, and they caught Michigan State off a high win. So it could be situational for Purdue for their 8 wins. Obviously, we'll dive deep into it more when it comes closer to the game, but definitely excited for this matchup, no question.
Yeah, and that kind of speaks to coaching, really. That kind of speaks to Jeff Brom saying, "Hey, we don't care that you're ranked high. We don't care that you're just coming off." I think Michigan State had just come off a win at Michigan, if I'm not mistaken. They were riding high. The college football playoff was absolutely in their view, and then Purdue just upsets them like it's nothing. And then they do the same against Iowa when they were like a top 2 team in the country. I think they were the number 2 team in the country at the time, and they knocked them off. So they're just kind of the spirit breakers, I guess, and they don't care too much about who they're playing. They're gonna go out there and just play their best, like Brom is telling them to, and that kind of speaks to me as a team that's not going to be afraid of the big stage. I know you can't really call Nashville the big stage, but you get what I mean. In a bowl game like this against a good Tennessee team, against a good offense like Tennessee, I don't think they're going to be afraid.
Yeah, like you said, Ethan, I'm not too well read on this Purdue team, so I won't pretend to speak on their team, but I think this will be a really fun game. If you look at, like you said, this fan base from Purdue, they always seem to be really passionate. They're an 8-4 team, similar to our team, sitting at 7-5. I looked at the maps just a minute ago to see how far Purdue was from, and I'm, obviously not every Purdue fan lives in Purdue, but it's a 5-hour drive from Purdue to Nashville, a little over. So I think a lot of Purdue fans will show up. And so I think that'll make it fun because obviously, Tennessee is going to show up no matter where the bowl game was going to be at. So I'm looking forward to just kind of seeing how these 2 teams match up, fan base wise and on the field.
Just one final thing kind of from the Vegas perspective. Purdue came out as a 3-point favorite and the over-under was at 58. That has now gone to a Tennessee at a 3-point favorite, and the over-under now is, I think, at 62. So clearly Tennessee fans have hammered the Vols and the over, and so much Vegas has shifted in about a 6-point spread and 4 points in the over-under. So it's turning into fans have shifted that much, or the people have loved Tennessee that much in this matchup, and of course the over-under. So that's a big note and a big, if you're a gambling person, I would hit it now. You need to get on the money, get it before it gets bad. So just kind of a point of reference out there. So,
well, thank you for that update, Riley. But yeah, we know Tennessee fans are going to travel well. There's going to be a lot of orange there in Nissan Stadium. Obviously, that's all a ways away, December 30th. So day before New Year's Eve, I believe at 3 p.m. So they get the afternoon game. And like it's been said, we'll have full coverage of that, full preview devoted to that coming later. We just want to get the initial reaction out now. But that's going to do it for this section. We're going to have a special bonus section coming right up after this. We'll have Nate Tasato on to talk some Tennessee volleyball. Their season just wrapped up, so we're looking forward to that. But thank you three for being here. We'll catch you next time. Welcome back, everyone, to this second section of the Checkerboard Chat. We got a bit of a special section today to talk some Tennessee volleyball. Their season just came to an end last week. So joining us today on the Checkerboard Chat is Nate Tasato, staff writer at the Beacon. He's been our volleyball beat writer. Nate, thanks a lot for being here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Just finished up finals and season ended, so we're coming to an end on a lot of things. I'm doing good.
Nice. I will say I'm also joined by Ethan Stone as well, the assistant sports editor. I'm Josh Lane, for those of you scoring at home. So let's just get started. The volleyball, I would say they wrapped up a pretty successful season. I didn't follow as closely as maybe you did, Nate, but let's see, they finished 20-10 on the year, 11-7 record in the SEC. So Nate, just kind of, walk me through the season, just kind of what stands out to you as what they did well, maybe some struggles. Just we'll get into all of that. Just kind of walk us through that.
Yeah, I think they definitely had a really good year. I think just a bounce back year in general. I know just last year they barely missed the NCAA tournament. And one of the first things that they told me, just like one of the first interviews I had with one of the seniors, they were like, I was like, how's the year going? What's the goals? And they were like, we just want to get to the NCAA tournament. Nothing else really matters. And they did. So I thought that was really cool to see them throughout the year, just to have one common goal and then achieve it, just being there. Over the season, I think it was a generally good season. I think they started out really strong. They were just dominating everybody in the beginning of the season. Out of their first 10 games, I know they swept their opponents 7 times. And the losses that they did lose to were against some pretty high ranking teams. I know they played Baylor, that was number 9, and then Pitt, which was number 7, just back to back in the early season. And then they continued doing good in the early season, and then in SEC play, they kind of hit a wall. I would say they kind of struggled a little bit just finishing up the season. They lost to some opponents that they shouldn't have on paper. I know Texas A&M got the best of them, and then LSU was another team that wasn't ranked at this time. I think they were ranked 20th overall in the season, and then they struggled a little bit. I know they went on a little losing streak in the midseason, and then just ending out the season, they lost to Missouri, another team on paper that you wouldn't think that the Lady Vols would lose to. And then the NCAA tournament went well. I think they beat North Carolina in the first round, and then they pushed Ohio State, the host team there, to 4 sets, and then that's how their season went.
Yeah. So you mentioned a little bit, just sort of their struggles and maybe an inability to, be consistent and to really find their footing. As you mentioned, they picked up that ranked win over top 10 Baylor early on, but just, couldn't keep their momentum going. Maybe some underperformance in SEC play. What can you attribute to that? Was it, maybe a couple of individual performances that weren't where they needed to be, or just, I don't know, a mindset in general as a team, maybe kind of looking past an opponent, or what was going on there in your mind, as in terms
I think
of
it was really strange, seeing them in just the beginning of the season. That was one of the first things I noticed, that they were just so dominant and just running over teams, and then when they would lose, it would be relatively quick. I think that so often they would go up by a lot and be very aggressive, and then the ones that they lost, they would lose the first set and just never be able to rebound from it. Another big thing that I think stood out with this team in particular was just their away record was just not comparable to when they were at home. At Thompson Bowling Arena, they went 12-3, and then on away they were 5-7 on the end of the year. They just could not, I guess, perform at the level they needed to when they were on the road, and that was just detrimental to their season. It really killed them when it mattered most and when they needed a big win on the road and they just couldn't pull it together.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk the postseason a little bit. As you mentioned, North Carolina in the first round. I don't know how long their postseason drought had been, but you did mention they missed out in 2020. Obviously, that was a weird year. They played like half the games, and maybe even less than that, less than half. But for them to return to the postseason was almost a win in itself, because as you mentioned, that was just the main goal for all the players, correct?
Yeah, it was definitely a really big win for them. In the postseason, I think they were. Oh man, I'm sorry, dude. I forgot your question. What were you saying?
I was just wondering, just them returning to the postseason. That was pretty big on its own.
Yes. The postseason was huge. I know that was their big goal. And then just how they performed in the postseason was really interesting too, because their first opponent, North Carolina, the head coach Yves Rackhamwant, played there and then coached there and then came to Tennessee. So that was really interesting and a really good game. It was a really close game. I think really close game and competitive wise. And then Ohio State, that was another really close game, 4-set loss. But the really interesting thing was once they lost in like the locker room when I got to talk to them, a lot of them weren't sad per se, but just really proud of what the season was and how they accomplished, how they got there and just all they accomplished in the season.
Okay. That seems a bit interesting to me. Ethan, you're waving your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say Ohio State too. They're a good squad. I mean, I was looking them up just a little bit ago, and obviously I knew, if you're getting to the NCAA tournament, and you're knocking off Tennessee, who played well this season. You've got to be a good team. They lost 5 games this year, and all of them were to ranked opponents. Twice to Purdue. I think I saw twice to Minnesota, and then one earlier in the season to Wisconsin, who's the number 3 team in the country. So they were on like a 9-game winning streak going into this game, and Tennessee gave them a fight. Like the last set was 25-21, I believe, and so Tennessee was right in that one. Could have forced a final set, first to 15, and they could be moving on. I believe to face. They're playing today actually. They face Georgia Tech would be the next team Tennessee would have faced in the Sweet 16. But like Nate was saying, I feel like the goal last year because they missed it just so slightly. Obviously, I was the beat writer for volleyball last season. And I personally thought they should have made it in the tournament. They were that close. They were like one of the last teams to not make it. And the NCAA COVID and eligibility rule kind of forced the volleyball tournament to cut it to 48 teams instead of 64 like it normally is. So Tennessee would have made it on a normal year. So you can tell that the players just wanted to make it back. That's really all they cared about. And for them to have that mentality and then go in and almost make it to the Sweet 16, that just shows the coaching ability of Yves Rackhamwant and just, how determined they are just to keep going.
Well, speaking of the players, Eric, that's a good segue into the next topic of just some of the impact players this season. I know they had a pretty good senior class, and I'll let you get into all the details there, but just walk, who were obviously some of the biggest names for Tennessee volleyball. Maybe any breakout players or people that surprised you and weren't necessarily expected to perform at the level that they did, or maybe on the flip side of that, any slumping season, any underwhelming season. Just kind of walk us through the roster. How did that shake out this year, Nate?
Yeah, definitely. I think when people think about like Tennessee volleyball, it's all about Lily Felts and just she was a 4-year starter and just a very instrumental player to the program. She was really, and I think in her junior year last season, she was like the main offensive threat, and they really ran everything through Lily Felts. And she was I think she was leading. She led the team last year in kills, and she's continued to be a really good player this year. But one of the biggest things was adding the 2 graduate students in Brianna Reynolds. Brianna was an outside hitter that just dominated this season, just being so new and they really ran with it with her, and she just did amazing. I mean, she led the team in kills, and almost every single game, she was the top scorer out of all of the Lady Vols. So Lily Felts was good. Danielle Mahaffey, just did really good on the defensive side. She would consistently lead the team in blocks and just be just a wall at the net. And I think when looking at Tennessee's roster, they have a really loaded senior roster with really talented players, and one of the most experienced positions on that team is the middle blocker position. They have a graduate student in Nicole Shanahan, Ava Bell, and Danielle Mahaffey, all in the middle position, and it was a really competitive spot. But I think Mahaffey just really did really well. She really stepped up this year and just carried the team. You didn't see too much of Ava Bell. I know she had a slight injury, but it was mostly Mahaffey the under in the middle position. And then, Natalie Hayward, she was the setter, another senior that just did amazing. She really did a good job setting up the team and just setting up all the hitters around her. And I know it was almost like every week when I was covering the volleyball team that someone in the team would get an honor, an SEC player of the week, setter of the week, defensive, offensive player of the week. It was just constant. And then it was just a really, really talented senior class. And I think that was contribute to a lot to how they did this year.
Yeah. So then what happens next year then? I mean, where do they go if they lose a lot of the senior talent? I don't know how all the NCAA eligibility rules are working for sure this year with COVID and everything. I don't know if there's any extra years, but is there going to be a big drop off in talent maybe, you think, with just losing the sheer amount of seniors?
I definitely think it might hurt them a little bit because just all throughout the season, I don't think there's really been any like underclassmen playing or at least starting at least. They're offensively there's so many seniors that it's definitely gonna, I think, impact them just going forward. But they still have a pretty talented juniors like Fingal and Madison Bryant, who's been the libero for almost all of the season, and they just really have a lot of young talent. And it's really going to be interesting just to see how they do next year, just because they're losing so much, and hopefully I think they have a lot of young talent that's coming up and is ready to take that challenge.
Well, let's talk about their head coach now, Eve Reckham-Watt. I believe this was her 4th season at Tennessee. As you mentioned, she had previous stops in North Carolina, maybe as a player, but just how do you feel about her as a coach? I know obviously she has a good record, but you lose early in the tournament. Just does that change anything? Just how would you evaluate her season, and what do players think of her, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I think in the player standpoint, I think all the players really like her. She's really passionate about what she does, and I think she has a good record just to prove it. I think she's 4th all-time winnings and coaches, and I'm pretty sure she's very close to being 3rd. So that's really cool. I think it just says a lot about her as a coach, just her ability to come in here and just do well. I think a few years ago that Tennessee volleyball wasn't in the greatest position, and I think she really turned this program around and just continues to dominate even this year, last year, and hopefully next year. I think she's got a really good squad behind her, and I think she could be here for a while just if she continues just to perform the way she does.
I was unmuted. Got to figure this Zoom stuff out. It's been a while. So I think you kind of hinted on it there at the end of what you just said, but do you think she's the right fit for this program going forward? I mean, they might step back a bit just given who they're losing this offseason, but you think she Reckham-Watt's still the best coach at Tennessee going forward?
I definitely think so. I think she probably is the best fit just because she just dominated and just recently has just been doing so good. And again, I think the passion thing is a lot. This says a lot about her. I think just watching all the season and different head coaches and seeing them how they interact with their players, and I would never find Coach Reckham-Watt just on the sideline. She would always be standing up, literally right next to the players, just rooting them on and being very emotional and passionate and open with them.
Yeah. Ethan, you got anything else to add before we wrap it up?
I think I just echo Nate's earlier point where he said that Tennessee volleyball wasn't always relevant. And, you know, in her fourth season to be, in my opinion, in her third and fourth season to be basically NCAA tournament teams, that has to mean something. And, you know, with the senior class leaving, you know, with a lot of talent leaving, it's going to be interesting to see next year just how she'll be able to rebound from that. Obviously, I believe Lily Phelps leaving is as big as you can get, and you know, just all the players that Nate listed earlier. That's obviously going to hurt Tennessee volleyball moving forward. So I guess her next big test, her first test was just get to the NCAA tournament. Her next test is sustain it without all those big time players. See what you can do with Morgan Fingal. See what you can do with Madison Bryant moving forward.
Yeah, and definitely, I think you were saying something about COVID eligibility. I think a lot of the players are just moving on. I think their schooling is done, and I think that's the end of their career. I think a lot of them have the option to play, but I don't think, or at least I haven't heard anyone who's wanting to return and continue the grind.
So no super seniors, no one going for that graduate degree or anything.
Yeah, so far, but you know, you never know if they're gonna come up with like some random, I'm coming back, staying here, bringing them for the tournament.
Yeah, well, from that one perspective of no more schooling, I can't blame them at all.
For sure.
But that's going to wrap up this episode of the Checkerboard Chat. Nate, thanks again for joining us and talking some volleyball. That was fun. Hope we all have a good Christmas break, finish finals strong. I guess we'll see you next time.